Like any other written constitution in the world, the Constitution of India also provides for its amendment in order to adjust itself according to the changing conditions and needs. Article 368 in Part 20 of the Constitution deals with the powers of Parliament to amend the Constitution and its procedure. First Amendment Act, 1951. Issues involved in the cases included freedom of speech, acquisition of the Zamindari land, state monopoly of trade, etc. Second Amendment Act, 1952. Readjusted the scale of representation in the Lok Sabha by providing that one member could represent even more than 750,000 persons. Third Amendment Act, 1954. Empowered the Parliament to control the production, supply and distribution of the foodstuffs, cattle fodder, raw cotton, cotton seed and raw jute in the public interest. Fourth Amendment Act, 1955. Made the scale of compensation given in lieu of compulsory acquisition of private property beyond the scrutiny of courts. Authorized the state to nationalize any trade. Fifth Amendment Act, 1955. Empowered the President of India to fix the time limit for the state legislatures to express their views on the proposed central legislation affecting the areas, boundaries and names of the states. Sixth Amendment Act, 1956. Included a new subject in the Union list i.e. taxes on the sale and purchase of goods in the course of interstate trade and commerce and restricted the state's power in this regard. Seventh Amendment Act, 1956. To implement the recommendations of the State Reorganization Committee and to implement the State Reorganization Act. 1956. Eighth Amendment Act, 1960. Extended the reservation of seats for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and special representation for the Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for a period of 10 years, i.e. up to 1970. Ninth Amendment Act, 1960. Facilitated the cession of the Indian territory of Berubri Union, located in West Bengal, to Pakistan as provided in the Indo-Pakistan Agreement, 1958. 10th Amendment Act, 1961. Incorporation of Dadra, Nagar and Haveli as a union territory, consequent to acquisition from Portugal. 11th Amendment Act, 1961. Changed the procedure of election of the Vice President by providing for an electoral college instead of a joint meeting of the two houses of the Parliament. Provided that the election of the President or Vice President cannot be challenged on the ground of any vacancy in the appropriate electoral college. 12th Amendment Act, 1962. Incorporated Goa, Daman and Diu in the Indian Union. 13th Amendment Act, 1962. Gave the status of a state to Nagaland and made special provisions for it. 14th Amendment Act, 1962. Incorporated Puducherry in the Indian Union. Provided for the creation of legislatures and council of ministers for the union territories of Himachal Pradesh, Manipur, Tripura, Goa, Daman and Diu, and Puducherry. 15th Amendment Act 1963. Increased the retirement age of High Court judges from 60 to 62 years. 16th Amendment Act, 1963. Included sovereignty and integrity in the forms of oaths or affirmations to be subscribed by contestants to the legislatures, members of the legislatures, ministers, judges and CAG of India. 17th Amendment Act, 1964. Prohibited the acquisition of land under personal cultivation unless the market value of the land is paid as compensation. 18th Amendment Act, 1966. Made it clear that the power of Parliament to form a new state also includes a power to form a new state or union territory by uniting a part of a state or a union territory to another state or union territory. It created new states, namely, Punjab and Haryana. 19th Amendment Act, 1966. Abolished the system of election tribunals and vested the power to hear election. 20th Amendment Act, 1966. Validated certain appointments of district judges in the UP which were declared void by the Supreme Court. 21st Amendment Act, 1967. Included Sindhi as the 15th language in the 8th Schedule, 22nd Amendment Act, 1969. Facilitated the creation of a new autonomous state of Meghalaya within the state of Assam, 23rd Amendment Act, 1969. Extended the reservation of seats for the SCs and STs, and special representation for the Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for a further period of 10 years, i.e. up to 1980. 24th Amendment Act, 1971. Affirmed the power of Parliament to amend any part of the Constitution including fundamental rights by amending Article 13 and 368. Made it compulsory for the President to give his assent to a constitutional amendment bill, 25th Amendment Act, 1971. Curtailed the fundamental right to property. Provided that any law made to give effect to the directive principles contained in Article 39, B, or C, cannot be challenged on the ground of violation of the rights guaranteed by Articles 14, 19 and 31, 26th Amendment Act, 1971. Abolished the privy purses and privileges of the former rulers of princely states, 27th Amendment, 1971. Empowered the administrators of certain union territories to promulgate ordinances. 28th Amendment Act, 1972. Abolished the special privileges of ICS officers and empowered the Parliament to determine their service conditions. 29th Amendment Act, 1972. Included to Kerala Acts on Land Reforms in the 9th Schedule, 30th Amendment Act, 1972. Did away with the provision which allowed appeal to the Supreme Court in civil cases involving an amount of 20,000 and provided instead that an appeal can be filed in the Supreme Court only if the case involves a substantial question of law, 31st Amendment Act, 1972. Increased the number of Lok Sabha seats from 525 to 545. 32nd Amendment Act 1973. Made special provisions to satisfy the aspirations of the people of the Telangana region in Andhra Pradesh, 33rd Amendment Act, 1974. Amended Articles 101 and 190 and provided that the resignation of the members of Parliament and the state legislatures may be accepted by the Speaker Chairman only if he is satisfied that the resignation is voluntary or genuine, 34th Amendment Act, 1974. Included 20 more land tenure and land reforms acts of various states in the 9th Schedule, 35th Amendment Act, 1974. Terminated the protectorate status of Sikkim and conferred the status of an associate state of the Indian Union. The 10th Schedule was added laying down the terms and conditions of association of Sikkim with the Indian Union. 36th Amendment Act, 1975. Made Sikkim a full-fledged state of the Indian Union and omitted the 10th Schedule, 37th Amendment Act, 1975. Provided Legislative Assembly and Council of Ministers for the Union Territory of Arunachal Pradesh, 38th Amendment Act, 1975. Made the declaration of emergency by the President non-justiciable. Made the promulgation of ordinances by the President, governors and administrators of Union Territories non-justiciable. Empowered the President to declare different proclamations of national emergency on different grounds simultaneously. 39th Amendment Act, 1975. Placed the disputes relating to the President, Vice President, Prime Minister, and Speaker beyond the scope of the judiciary. They are to be decided by such authority as may be determined by the Parliament. 40th Amendment Act, 1976. Empowered the Parliament to specify from time to time the limits of the territorial waters, the continental shelf, the exclusive economic zone, EEZ, and the maritime zones of India. 41st Amendment Act, 1976. Raised the retirement age of members of State Public Service Commission and Joint Public Service Commission from 60 to 62. 42nd Amendment Act, 1976. It is also known as Mini Constitution. it was enacted to give effect to the recommendations of Swan Singh Committee. Added 3 new words, i.e., socialist, secular and integrity, in the preamble. Made the President bound by the advice of the Cabinet. Added 3 new directive principles viz. Equal justice and free legal aid, participation of workers in the management of industries. Shifted 5 subjects from the state list to the concurrent list, viz. Education, forests, protection of wild animals and birds, weights and measures and administration of justice, constitution and organization of all courts except the Supreme Court and the High Courts. Empowered the center to deploy its armed forces in any state to deal with the grave situation of law and order. 43rd Amendment Act, 1977. Restored the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and the High Courts in respect of judicial review and issue of writs. Deprived the Parliament of its special powers to make laws to deal with anti-national activities. 44th Amendment Act, 1978. Empowered the President to send back once the advice of Cabinet for reconsideration. But the reconsidered advice is to be binding on the President. Replaced the term internal disturbance by armed rebellion in respect of national emergency. Made the President to declare a national emergency only on the written recommendation of the Cabinet. Deleted the right to property from the list of fundamental rights and made it only a legal right. 45th Amendment Act, 1980. Extended the reservation of seats for the SCs and STs and special representation for the Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for a further period of 10 years, i.e., up to 1990. 46th Amendment Act, 1982. Enabled the states to plug loopholes in the laws and realize sales tax dues. 47th Amendment Act, 1984. Included 14 land reforms acts of various states in the 9th Schedule. 48th Amendment Act, 1984. Facilitated the extension of President's rule in Punjab beyond 1 year without meeting the 2 special conditions for such extension. 49th Amendment Act, 1984. Gave a constitutional sanctity to the Autonomous District Council in Tripura. 50th Amendment Act, 1984. Empowered the Parliament to restrict the fundamental rights of persons employed in intelligence organizations and telecommunication systems set up for the armed forces or intelligence organizations. 51st Amendment Act, 1984. Provided for reservation of seats in the Lok Sabha for scheduled tribes in Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland and Mizoram as well as in the legislative assemblies of Meghalaya and Nagaland. 52nd Amendment Act, 1985. This amendment popularly known as anti-defection law. It provided for disqualification of members of parliament and state legislatures on the ground of defection and added a new 10th schedule containing the details in this regard. 53rd Amendment Act, 1986. Made special provisions in respect of Mizoram and fixed the strength of its assembly at a minimum of 40 members. 54th Amendment Act, 1986. Increased the salaries of the Supreme Court and High Court judges and enabled the Parliament to change them in future by an ordinary law. 55th Amendment Act, 1986. Made special provisions in respect of Arunachal Pradesh and fixed the strength of its assembly at a minimum of 30 members. 56th Amendment Act, 1987. Fixed the strength of the Goa Legislative Assembly at a minimum of 30 members. 57th Amendment Act, 1987. Reserved seats for the STs in the legislative assemblies of the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland. 58th Amendment Act, 1987. Provided for an authoritative text of the Constitution in Hindi language and gave the same legal sanctity to the Hindi version of the Constitution. 59th Amendment Act, 1988. Provided for the declaration of national emergency in Punjab on the ground of internal disturbance. 60th Amendment Act, 1988. increased the ceiling of taxes on professions, trades, callings and employments from 250 rupees per annum to 2,500 rupees per annum. 61st Amendment Act, 1989. Reduced the voting age from 21 years to 18 years for the Lok Sabha and State Legislative Assembly elections. 62nd Amendment Act, 1989. Extended the reservation of seats for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and special representation for the Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for the further period of 10 years, that is up to 2000. 63rd Amendment Act, 1989. Repealed the changes introduced by the 59th Amendment Act of 1988 in relation to Punjab. In other words, Punjab was brought at par with the other states in respect of emergency provisions. 64th Amendment Act, 1990. Facilitated the extension of the President's rule in Punjab up to a total period of 3 years and 6 months. 65th Amendment Act, 1990. Provided for the establishment of a multi-member national commission for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the place of a special officer for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. 66th Amendment Act, 1990. Included 55 more land reforms acts of various states in the 9th schedule. 67th Amendment Act, 1990. Facilitated the extension of the President's rule in Punjab up to a total period of 4 years. 68th Amendment Act, 1991. Facilitated the extension of the President's rule in Punjab up to a total period of 5 years. 69th Amendment Act, 1991. Accorded a special status to the Union Territory of Delhi by designing it as the National Capital Territory of Delhi. The amendment also provided for the creation of a 70-member Legislative Assembly and a 7-member Council of Ministers for Delhi. 70th Amendment Act, 1992. Provided for the inclusion of the members of the Legislative Assemblies of National Capital Territory of Delhi and the Union Territory of Puducherry in the Electoral College for the election of the President. 71st Amendment Act, 1992 included Konkani, Manipuri and Nepali languages in the 8th schedule. With this, the total number of scheduled languages increased to 18. 72nd Amendment Act, 1992 provided for reservation of seats for the scheduled tribes in the Legislative Assembly of Tripura. 73rd Amendment Act, 1992 granted constitutional status and protection to the Panchayati Raj institutions. 74th Amendment Act, 1992 granted constitutional status and protection to the urban local bodies. 75th Amendment Act, 1994. Provided for the establishment of rent tribunals for the adjudication of disputes with respect to rent, its regulation and control and tenancy issues including the rights, title and interest of landlords and tenants. 76th Amendment Act, 1994. Included the Tamil Nadu Reservation Act of 1994, which provides for 69% reservation of seats in educational institutions and posts in state services, in the 9th schedule to protect it from judicial review. In 1992, the Supreme Court ruled that the total reservation should not exceed 50%. 77th 7th Amendment Act, 1995. Provided for reservation in promotions in government jobs for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. 78th Amendment Act, 1995. Included 27 more land reforms acts of various states in the 9th schedule. 79th Amendment, 1999. Extended the reservation of seats for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and special representation for the Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for a further period of 10 years, up to 2010. 80th Amendment Act, 2000. Provided for an alternative scheme of devolution of revenue between the centre and states. Recommended that out of the total income obtained from central taxes and duties, 29% should be distributed among the states. 81st Amendment Act, 2000. Empowered the state to consider the unfilled reserved vacancies of a year as a separate class of vacancies to be filled up in any succeeding year or years. This amendment ended the 50% ceiling on reservation in backlog vacancies. 82nd Amendment Act, 2000 provided for making of any provision in favor of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes for relaxation in qualifying marks in any examination or lowering the standards of evaluation, for reservation in matters of promotion to the public services of the centre and the states. 83rd Amendment Act, 2000 provided that no reservation in panchayats need be made for scheduled castes in Arunachal Pradesh. The total population of the state is tribal and there are no scheduled castes. 84th Amendment Act, 2001 extended the ban on the readjustment of seats in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for another 25 years, that is up to 2026. 85th Amendment Act, 2001 provided for consequential seniority in the case of promotion by virtue of rule of reservation for the government servants belonging to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes with retrospective effect from June 1995. 86th Amendment Act, 2002 made elementary education a fundamental right under the Article 21. 87th Amendment Act, 2003 provided for the readjustment and rationalization of territorial constituencies in the states on the basis of the population figures of 2001 census and not 1991 census as provided earlier by the 84th Amendment Act of 2001. 88th Amendment Act, 2003 made a provision for service tax, Article 268A. Taxes on services are levied by the centre, but their proceeds are collected as well as appropriated by both the centre and the states in accordance with the principles formulated by Parliament. 89th Amendment Act, 2003 bifurcated the erstwhile combined National Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes into two separate bodies, namely National Commission for Scheduled Castes, Article 338, and National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, Article 338A. 90th Amendment Act, 2003 provided for maintaining the erstwhile representation of the scheduled tribes and non-scheduled tribes in the Assam Legislative Assembly from the Bodoland Territorial Areas District, Article 332, subsection 6. 91st Amendment Act, 2003 the total number of ministers, including the Prime Minister, in the Central Council of Ministers, shall not exceed 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha. The total number of ministers, including the Chief Minister, in the Council of Ministers in a state shall not exceed 15% of the total strength of the Legislative Assembly of that state. But the number of ministers, including the Chief Minister, in a state shall not be less than 12. 92nd Amendment Act, 2003 included 4 more languages in the 8th schedule. They are Bodo, Dogri, Dongri, Maithili and Santhali. With this, the total number of constitutionally recognized languages increased to 22. 93rd Amendment Act, 2005 empowered the state to make special provisions for the socially and educationally backward classes or the scheduled castes or the scheduled tribes in educational institutions, including private educational institutions, whether aided or unaided by the state, except the minority educational institutions. 94th Amendment Act, 2006 freed Bihar from the obligation of having a tribal welfare minister and extended the same provision to Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. 95th Amendment Act, 2009 extended the reservation of seats for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and special representation for the Anglo-Indians in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies for a further period of 10 years, that is up to 2020. Article 334. 96th Amendment Act, 2011 substituted Oriya for Odia. Consequently, the Oriya language in the 8th schedule shall be pronounced as Oriya. 97th Amendment Act, 2011 gave constitutional status and protection to cooperative societies. 98th Amendment Act, 2013 to empower the Governor of Karnataka to take steps to develop the Hyderabad-Karnataka region. 99th Amendment Act 2014 replaced the collegium system of appointing judges to the Supreme Court and High Courts with a new body called the National Judicial Appointments Commission. However, in 2015, the Supreme Court declared this Amendment Act as unconstitutional and void. Consequently, the earlier collegium system became operative again. 100th Amendment Act 2014 gave effect to the acquiring of certain territories by India and transfer of certain other territories to Bangladesh through the exchange of enclaves and retention of adverse possessions in pursuance of the Land Boundary Agreement of 1974 and its Protocol of 2011. 101st Amendment Act 2017 Introduction of the Goods and Services Tax. 102nd Amendment Act 2018 Constitutional status was provided to the National Commission for Backward Classes under India's Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. 103rd Amendment Act 2019 It introduced reservations for economic weaker section for the first time in independent India. 104th Amendment Act 2020 The Indian Constitution provided reservation to SC and Sent representatives in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. This reservation was provided for 70 years. It has been extended to 80 years till 25th January 2030. Anglo-Indian reservation has been removed. Thanks for watching Speed GK YouTube channel. Please support our YouTube channel. Kindly subscribe and also please share this video with your friends. Thank you.